Good evening, everyone. My name is Tubten Jigme, and Venerable Children has been traveling, and she'll be here next week to continue on the mind training like rays of the sun. And this week I'm going to continue with a review that Venerable Tarpa started last week on the training of the 5 powers. And she talked about the 5 powers during life, and tonight I'll review the 5 powers at the time of death. So let's first begin by cultivating our motivation tonight. Let's remember the preciousness of this life, and its fleeting nature. We want to develop our potential to its fullest. And reflecting on the certainty of death and the uncertainty of when we will die. It's important for us to prepare our mind for our death, but we can't escape it. So if we familiarize ourselves with the training of the 5 powers, practice during our life, and then at the time of death we'll be able to access its methods. And we'll be able to focus our minds in a positive direction. And this will enable us to continue on the path to enlightenment. So then we can be equipped to help all beings to in the best possible way. And so let's cultivate that vast motivation. So one way to think of the 5 powers is to think of them as a condensed practice of the complete aspects of the path. And the 5 are the power of the virtuous seed, or virtuous karmic actions, and the power of aspiration, and the power of remorse or destruction, and the power of intention or motivation, and the power of acquaintance or familiarity. And so if we remember that this practice is a condensed version of all the aspects of the path, then it makes perfect sense that we would want to practice it daily. And one of the best ways to practice it is to do it in meditation practice and also off the cushion. And so meditation twice a day, in the morning first, is a opportunity to really set our intention and get our minds going in this direction. And then at night we check up to see how we did in the day, and we can make some adjustments then in how we're practicing. And if we do this day by day, little by little, then we transform ourselves, transform our mind. And if we practice these 5 powers well, everything that we are doing then really is for the benefit of others. And if we practice for the benefit of others, then the result of that is enlightenment. You know, sooner or later, that's the result. And by practicing these 5 powers and learning them well, then at the time of death, that's how we will have a calm and peaceful experience of death. It's very possible. People do that every day. Venerable Chödrön made the distinction between the techniques of transference of consciousness used after one takes a POA initiation, and this method of the thought training, from the thought training teachings. And people that take the POA initiation, some of them think that just by virtue of taking the initiation that will transform their death experience. And I think, and especially I think in this country, that's can be kind of common, and it's kind of that quick fix mentality, that, you know, fast food mentality that, you know, it's going to happen quick. And that's not how it works. We have to, anything of value, we have to practice it over and over again for it to have some result. And this initiation, if taken, involves then the continual familiarization with the method, doing long life practice, and, you know, practicing daily in the life. The great Lama Pabanka Deshen Ningpo said the mind training transference technique does not employ the sounds of hic and pei, which is in the POA initiation, but is more profound than any other method of transference of consciousness. So of all of the methods, it seems to be written that this one is very powerful if used and practiced. So in the Mind Training Like Rays of the Sun book, which we're reviewing from, the first sentences begin, in relating these instructions on the 5 powers to the advice concerning what to do at the time of death. The text says, the 5 powers themselves are the great vehicles precept on the transference of consciousness. Cultivate these paths of practice. And so this practice results in being able to steer our mind during life and then also at the time of death. And if we steer our mind in a certain way by the power of virtue, then we can transfer our mind into a good rebirth. So the first power is the power of the virtuous seed, or virtuous karmic actions. And again, Non Kapel, the author, writes, we should purify the misdeeds which will cause our suffering in the future by application of the 4 powers. And so this is the common practice, the purifying practice, and we use the 4 opponent powers. It's generating regret, and repairing the relationship, and making a determination not to do it again, and then doing some kind of remedial action. And so, again, you know, I'll just keep coming back to, at the time of death, if we don't have these practices habituated and firmly in the mind, it will be very hard for us to access them. Yeah. And of course, since we know we'll die, we don't know when, doing a daily purification practice really is probably the best insurance policy, much better than the best health insurance we could ever buy, I think. So if we purify daily, then when our death comes, we won't be overwhelmed by all of the regrets and all of the past negative actions that arise in the mind when we have the knowing that we're dying, because that's what happens. The work I did before becoming a nun, I had the opportunity and the privilege of being with a lot of people that died, and I helped them in the process of dying, and people that hadn't looked at their life really, and were just kind of busy and going about their living. When they started to die, all of the past actions, really, and the negative ones mostly, it didn't seem like they talked so much about the positive ones. More the negative ones, they arose and became very prominent in the mind. And if they didn't have long to live, then it seemed like there was such a struggle between the body dying and the mind trying to process these memories, that weren't really resolved. They were, like a big baggage. And seemed to be very uncomfortable and fearful death often. Whereas people who put a spiritual practice into their life and would live within that, at the time of death, their mind wasn't filled with regret and thinking about all of the past actions. They were more with the process of dying, and it was much calmer, much less painful, quite easeful in many cases, it looked like. And it makes sense if, we're overwhelmed by a life's worth of negativities. I don't know about y'all, but, daily I do negativities. And without a purification practice, I would be pretty burdened down pretty quickly. So I think it's so important. The other piece, of course, to that is when we do a purifying practice, that we have to open our hearts and let ourselves actually feel the purification, to set the action down now. It is past. We have regretted the action. So if we don't do that, then we're still not processing our actions very well, I don't think. And I think this came really clear to me, the power of purification, when I had the opportunity to do the 3-month Vajrasattva retreat here. And by the end of the 3rd month, the difference in the lightness, I felt so light. My mind felt so clear. I spent those 3 months going over all of my life and all of my actions and pretty rigorously purifying them. And physically, it even felt so different. And when I was finished with the retreat, my mind felt pretty clear. And I didn't feel like I was walking around with so much baggage like I felt before the retreat. That just, that doesn't mean that everything was purified totally, for sure, because we've been around for many eons, but it was very powerful, very powerful. And so it makes sense that when we're dying, we want to have the clearest mind possible so we can attend to that process and direct our minds. Because we can. The minds are so powerful, we can do that. So Nam Kapil writes, "It is extremely important not to hold on to anything that will be a source of attachment, but to offer all your possessions to the higher and lower fields of merit." So the higher fields of merit are the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And the lower fields of merit include sentient beings, and especially those who are poor, sick, in difficulty. And if we think about using our possessions during life to create merit by offering them, even if we still need some of the possessions and we keep them, but we, in our mind, give them away, then that's very beneficial. And it makes perfect sense because of the time of death, none of these possessions are going to be helpful. Not one of them. And so if we're attached to something and we don't consciously give it away, then when we're dying, the mind is going to want to grasp to it. And so it makes a lot of sense how Venerable is often really encouraging us to let go of things that we're holding on to. And of course, it's not only letting go of attachment, but desire, preferences, all of the things that the mind clings to. And again, if we don't, then those are the things that come up during the death process. I mean, I took care of a lot of people who were, within an hour or two dying, actually going to die, and they were spending their last mind moments wondering about if the car they parked in the garage the month before when they came to the hospital was still there or safe, or what the big bill was. And you don't want that to be your last thoughts. And they say in the trainings, whatever you're clinging to or attached to, then that propels your mind kind of in that direction, and who knows where you'd end up, but don't want it to leave it to chance like that, One of the things I try to practice is that each loss or even transition that I experience in life, I use that as practicing letting go. Because the more skillful I am at that, the easier it will be to let go of this body and to allow death. So any time that I'm disappointed by something, or I thought it was going to be this way and it ends up being that way, to really open to that and really step in and let it go consciously. Yes, okay, let it go. Just really accept it. And we have a lot of opportunity to do that in this life, with all of the changes. And of course, the big losses when somebody we care for dies, to to really work on that level, because when somebody close to us dies, it really wakes us up. It really kind of levels the playing field, and so we can work with our mind in a really good way. Then we have an opportunity to really make some headway, I think, with all of the attachments that we have when that happens. And then we can, offer that and dedicate that to, the person and their rebirth. So it can be a nice practice. Nam Kapel further writes, at the time of death be fearless and free from sorrow, thinking it's all right for me to die. We actually know how to die. We've done it many times. Yeah. And I think to make the distinction between, the body is not the same as the mind, so we don't need to cling to the body. And to kind of consciously habituate to that, I think is really important. So we want to focus on the consciousness, because that what travels to the next life. The body material, what does it do? It decomposes. It's like Venerable says, it's just, what does she say? It's vegetable goo or, yeah. So, to keep reminding ourselves of that. And it's very easy to see whatever state the mind is in, that sets the stage for the experience of death. If a person is angry that they're dying, they die an angry, pretty tortured death. That's what happens. And I think a lot of times, especially in this country, we don't see people dying much. It's so insular, it's so isolated. And I am so thankful that I've seen a lot of people die, because the first death I saw was in my family, and it was somebody that was quite angry, and it was really a terrible death. And if that's the only death I had experienced, then that would be my expectation of what it would be. And, there would be a lot of fear then, and a lot of really aversion to it. It's like, ugh, no. Because the person was older than me, and I think we kind of have that idea that if someone's older, they know a little better, and so, gosh, this is maybe the best it is, And that is so not accurate. I have seen such beautiful deaths, such beautiful deaths. And it's because the people were clearly just open-hearted, had, worked on accepting that this is what would happen. And it was just a lovely journey for everybody involved, I can remember one fellow who was quite young, and he knew he was dying, and he was sick for quite a while. He had AIDS, and got worse. This was back in the 80s probably, and he really worked with his mind, and did these. He didn't know about the 5 powers, but he did them. He was making amends, and he was giving his possessions away, and doing it in such a joyful way. He spent a lot of time thinking, oh, this will go here, and I think they'll enjoy that. And so really with some joy about it, feeling really generous. And the day he died, kind of in and out, of consciousness, and kind of close to the very end, when I was sitting by the bed, he opened his eyes and he said, "Do you see it?" And I said, "Well, what are you seeing?" And he said, "Well, there's the stairs. And so I'm going to go there now." And then he died. And he was just so peaceful, so, and that was his vision. That's what it was for him. And it was just lovely. It was like we all felt like we were kind of touched by some grace in the room, or I don't know what the word would be, but geez, it was just beautiful. And everyone around, it wasn't so heavy, sad. It was fine, He was fine. And so, I have a lot of confidence in the Buddha's teachings. And this fellow wasn't Buddhist. But he, on his own side, his own way, worked with his mind and had this kind of a death. Now, if we apply these methods, there is no doubt in my mind that we will be able to have a very peaceful death. I think the first big obstacle, though, is, of course, the self-centered attitude that keeps pulling us away from the remembering of that. And so that's another thing. Every time I see any being dying, so here at the Abbey, mostly it's insects, I spend a lot of time observing. And we have a lot of, like in the meditation hall, there's a lot of common houseflies in there a lot. And, within the period of 1 or 2 days, I see the fly flying around, getting weak, walking around, falling down, can't get up, and then finally dying. And so it's helpful to observe that. And I also think the flies that end up being in my sight in the meditation hall by me, there's some karmic connection there. In another life, who knows? My mother, I don't know, but there's a connection there. So even if we don't see, humans die, we do have the opportunity to see other beings die. One of the most lovely experiences I ever had was taking care of my 19-year-old cat who had a stroke, and it took him a long time to die. And that was such a beautiful experience, to be able to offer care to him. And he went in the way he went, and it took as long as it took. And lots of times animals can do it quite easy. He was very, he purred. He was, couldn't move anymore, but he purred. He was peaceful. He made eye contact. He, until the very last day, and then, died quite easy, quite simply. So we have the opportunity to get to know death. And I think it's just like anything else. If we don't familiarize, then it's scary and unknown, and it could get difficult. And to be in the presence of someone that's dying is so different than, seeing it in the media or in the movies or something. When you are in the room with somebody that dies, the contrast between the body with life in it and the body dead is so profound. You can't even describe it. But it really gets you to understand this is what death is. It's very helpful. I think also that we believe often that if the body is in a certain state, that death will be hard. So we equate like, oh, if somebody has, a lot of illness or, cancer throughout their body or something, then the death is going to be so hard. But my experience is that it wasn't so much about the state of the body. It was about the state of the mind. I have seen people in such debilitating shape, having no idea how they could even exist in the body and why even the body would still be alive. And they were calm and, under control with pain, no problem, seemed all right. And then somebody else with hardly any illness, not so much symptoms, and excruciating, and their mind was so untamed, they couldn't manage their mind and what was going on. They were resisting every moment what was happening. They didn't want it. And I think that's much more important, what the mind's doing, than what the body is doing. And if a person works with their mind, I have not seen anything that can't be managed medically, in my experience. And I think that there's a myth out there that there are certain things that no matter what you do, you're going to suffer so terribly. And that is not my experience. Maybe that's true, but it certainly isn't my experience. So this whole idea of accepting death as it is coming, and I think it seems to me that when you're dying. It's very rare when that is a shock. If you have any time at all, anyhow, and you can't fool people. And a lot of times people don't talk about it much that are dying because they're trying to protect their family members. That's not so helpful. It's really helpful if they're able to talk about it. And so Nam Kapel continues. He says that we should especially eliminate attachment to our bodies at the time of death. This is because the body has been the basis of I, or misconception of self, the root of all disturbing emotions, wherever we have been born, in all the realms of existence. And being attached to the body, we have indulged in the 10 unwholesome deeds, the 5 boundless actions, other deleterious behavior, in order to obtain food, clothing, other possessions, to meet our own selfish ends. Consequently, we are submerged in the unending sufferings of cyclic existence in general, and the unbearable pains of inferior rebirths in particular. And so, because of this body, we have this strong, strong, strong sense of I. Once we create this I, then immediately we have other. When we have other, we have separation. Then we start protecting I from other. And then all of the negative actions, all of the distortions, all of the afflictions arise from that. So in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, Shantideva says, whoever is attached to this body is frightened by even the small things. Who would not despise his enemy, the body which gives rise to such fear? So it is the attachment to the body that causes the fear. It's not the body. So we have to be careful not to start in on all the self-hate of body. It's the attachment. And so I think we have to ponder this a lot and learn what it feels like in the mind and body when we are attached. Because if we don't identify this, then how are we going to work to move our minds from the attachment? And I think that's very hard, but certainly we can do that, you know. And the best I know about it, at the place I'm at, is that any of the self-centered attitude states of my mind are often about attachment. And I know about the self-centered attitude because it's when I'm miserable. So it's pretty easy to identify, I think. Shantideva also says, wishing to find a means to relieve this body's hunger, thirst, sickness, you kill birds, fish, and deer, and loiter by the roadside to rob others. And that verse to me just brings up how this has been going on since beginningless time. I mean, this is history. This is what always is happening and, you know, continues to. He says, if for the sake of profit and comfort you would even kill your father and mother and misappropriate offerings to the three jewels, you will burn in the most severe hell. And that whole verse makes me very sad that we have the capacity through our distortions and afflictions to do such great harm to the beings that actually born us and raised us. That's very sad. And then the final verse, what wise man would desire, protect and coddle this body, who would not scorn it and regard it as an enemy? And again, we have to be careful about this language. We're talking about the attachment, not the body. Another result of long retreat to me that was so helpful after the or during the third month of the 3-month retreat that I did, it started to get so clear to me how much time and effort is spent on maintaining the body. And it was a very interesting experience. It wasn't one I've ever had before, or since actually, that it's almost like all of that activity was getting in the way of the calmness of the mind and of the deepening of the meditations. And I think that contrasted with how it usually is an example of what the attachment is to the body. So it's like a lot of that mind focused on, ooh, what are we going to eat, what's going to happen, all that stuff, it just starts falling away, which is very beneficial. And of course, we have to be careful, again, to try to find the middle balance of it. Because I could feel even then, you know, it would be like, oh, no sense to eat, no reason to eat. But, you know, that's not going to work either. That's going too far. So when that depth of kind of understanding and less attachment arises, then really to focus the mind to find the middle place with it then. And to use the mind to think about turning those activities in reasons to fuel the body so I can practice the Dharma. And I think that keeps it more in a middle place then. Not so much attachment. The next section, Nam Kapil writes, so we should make a strong determination to not adopt such an inferior body, the product of karma and afflictions in the future, but to let the reality of the mind its lack of inherent existence, rest in the perfect body of truth. So here, when we know we're dying, to consciously make the determination that we do not want to grasp onto another body, to actually put that in our mind. And I think, just the way the mind works and how powerful aspirations or intentions are, even if we don't believe it fully, but we kind of habituate to it, our minds will go there. That's where we'll end up, by not taking on another body. When I was looking at some of the different books that we had on the 5 powers, and Venerable Tarpa was kind to lend me one that Lama Zopa wrote. And he talked about, which would be another way to remember this first power that we're on still, is that when we are dying, we practice the 6 perfections, the 6 paramitas. That's the first power. Mm-hmm. So he writes, and I'm paraphrasing here, when you are dying, divide your belongings. Offer the first part to the Guru Triple Gem to collect merit, and use 1 part to make charity to sentient beings. For morality or ethics, you should purify negativities, generate bodhicitta, and engage in the precepts. For patience, if you have a grudge from the past, offer forgiveness. If forgiveness is not accepted, be patient and let there be no unhappiness in your mind. Regarding perseverance, whatever you do, do it with joy. The other 2, concentration and wisdom, are contained in these practices. So that's kind of another way to kind of think of the first power. The second power is the power of aspiration. And Nam Kapel writes, so we should make strong aspiration never to be separated from the awakening mind under any circumstances, nor to be dominated by the misconception of self or the disturbing emotions. Now that's a really big sentence that has a lot in it, to be able to do all that. Pabanka Deshan Ningpo again explained that this power means aspiring to take upon yourself all the sufferings, different defilements and negative karmas of all sentient beings, and to also generate bodhicitta, further to never fall under the control of the delusions and self-cherishing thought. So it seems like from all the different resources that I read, that really the most powerful is to remember bodhicitta, to really cultivate that over and over and over again. So that you can then do it at the time of death, in the intermediate state, and in all future lives. And then also that we want to make aspirations that we meet a guru that reveals the teachings on thought transformation and bodhicitta. And again, Lama Zopa writes, if you are meditating on emptiness, in emptiness there is no such thing as birth and death. So try to die with the mind the mind in that state of emptiness. You can think, death appears to be real and existing from its own side, and I believe it to exist in this way, but actually this is an hallucination. I think that would be a very good sentence to habituate to. And so it makes perfect sense. If we can do that during our day in the mundane ways, then at the time of death we can call that forward. Just like, when I was 4, I would forget to brush my teeth really a lot, and I had to have so many remindings. And now a day goes by that I don't even bring it to consciousness, but I do it. So it's that same mechanism, The third power is the power of remorse, or the power of destruction. And here Nam Kapil writes, remembering the disadvantages of the disturbing emotions, we should protect ourselves from being overwhelmed by them. And I love this quote by Shantideva. In the Engaging in the Bodhisattva Deeds, he says, as long as you don't drop the fire, the burning won't stop. In the same way, as long as you don't let go of the eye, suffering can't be abandoned. Therefore, to pacify your own sufferings and the sufferings of others, give yourself up for others and cherish others as yourself. So since we don't know if we're going to have disturbing emotions, disturbing visions when we're dying and when we're in the death process, again, it's very important to habituate ourselves to the notion that any disturbance in my mind at that time is what to be abandoned or what to be destroyed. So I'm not going to hook on it. I'm not going to go into the story of it. I'm not going to let it pull me. I don't want to grasp onto. I don't want to cling to. I don't want to follow the craving. I don't want to follow the attachment mind. And so I think kind of combining that all things that I am seeing are a hallucination, and then keeping firm with, I am holding on to bodhicitta. I am holding on to, I'm trying to practice taking on the suffering of others and giving them happiness. So it's kind of like that. It kind of reminds me of like a scary time. So once I did a what do you call that? Those white water raft trips, and the raft hit a big, I don't know, what do you call those, a boulder or something, and it flipped. And many of us flipped out and flew out, and just chaos. And you knew that it would be very easy to die in that moment. And I grabbed the side of the boat that had had a rope, and I just knew that I needed to hang on to that no matter what. And all of my attention, all of my focus, everything that I was about in that moment was holding on. I was not going to let go. And I think it's that same kind of, kind of keeping that focus in the eye of a storm, sort of, that you keep that focus no matter what. And we've all had experiences, I think. It's rare that a person lives and doesn't have an experience like that. So, use that to remind yourself the strength of the mind. The capacity we have is so vast. But if we get pulled into the disturbing emotions, then all of that resolve, all of that focus goes. So we don't let that fear take over or that grasping take over. We keep that firm resolve. And so, you know, as I was studying this, it started making so much more sense about how Venerable is so, children is so really unrelenting in teaching us to keep, you know, deepening our resolve, to keep strengthening our focus. And it's so we can use then that good skill at the time of death. Because that's really the next great opportunity, really, you know. Because we can tap into the subtleness of the mind at that point. And if we train well, then we can direct. You know, that's what they've been doing in Tibet for many centuries. So we make very strong determination not to let our body, speech, and mind go under the influence of, you know, the same old thing that we're trying to do each day, under the influence of ignorance, anger, clinging, attachment. So in this power of destruction, we also, you know, do the purifying here too, the Vajrasattva, or, you know, if we know how to do self-initiation and we're well enough to do it, then do it at the time. And just when we remember that one of the factors, one of the very powerful factors that determines what karma ripens at the time of death is the state of our mind. That's something that we have some ability to influence. I can't influence when, can't influence where it's going to happen. But I can influence how my mind reacts to it all. Mm-hmm. So to see clinging, grasping, craving, these very tight minds, not wanting to die, holding on to that thought, that all of those is what we need to let go of. We need to let go of them. And I think depending on, you know, how your mind works, everybody's mind is so different. For some people, it is cultivating, I'm going to stay calm and relax and just allow and not have any expectations and move through this. For other people, their mind would work with, okay, this is arising, it is only a hallucination, I'm not going to buy into it, this is the enemy. So by working with our minds while we're, you know, upright, healthy, and alive, we can see which works best for our minds, so that then at the time of death, then we kind of know which method to use. It's kind of like this big dress rehearsal, you know. Venerable Chodron said that Lama Yeshe would always say the body and mind don't need grasping. That's kind of a simple, you know, way of kind of keeping clear about that. And again, too, we can see how these practices are so connected. The practices at the time of death are so connected to the practices of living. Now, when I am under the influence of a negative state of mind and afflicted, if I have great tolerance for that and stay in that mind state for hours or days or weeks, well, what am I practicing? I'm strengthening that ability. Not helpful. Not helpful. So now, no matter what method to get yourself out of that, it doesn't matter what you use, and there's so many different methods, you know. That's that thing about getting the medicine chest full of all these different antidotes so that you can turn the mind as quickly as possible, as quickly as possible. Your death depends on it. Not only your life, your death depends on it. And so, if you're like me, sometimes it's very difficult to get that turned. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of focus. It takes a lot of kind of going inward, you know, and using all the resources. And so Venerable gave a great method to use that just when you're starting to fall asleep, to keep a little bit of your awareness, a little bit of your attention on what the mind is thinking. And if it's a neutral or a negative thought, just a worldly thought, whatever, consciously move that subtle mind to a virtuous thought. That you work with that. Because that's the kind of mind that we have at the time of death as we're dying. So work with that subtleness. I've been trying to do that since she taught that, and boy, my self-centered attitude is very active, pulling me away from that. You know, and I'm going really to sleep quick, all these things, you know, I can't grab it yet, you know. But if we keep working, we can. Of course we can. It's no different than I took a course once about remembering dreams, and all I did was, you know, 5 or 6 days, put a pad and pencil by my bed, and I started to remember every dream. You know, so if you habituate and you look at and you can access, you know. So the fifth power is the power of familiarity or acquaintance. And this is the one that explains what physical position to be in at the time of death, if that's possible. Nam Kapel says this concerns physical actions such as lying on your right side, your right cheek resting on your right hand, your head pointing to the north with your ring fingers stopping the breath from your right nostril, your left hand on your left thigh. Breathing only through your left nostril, transfer your consciousness. In this context, the great Chekawa said, there are many marvelous instructions on the transference of consciousness, but this is the most wonderful of them all. And so again, I think, you know, practicing this when we're healthy, kind of like a dress rehearsal, we're rehearsing. Then at the time of death, if the conditions are such that we can, it will feel more familiar. We'll feel like, yeah, this is the right place. Okay, we used our time up. It went really quick.